The NFL playoffs are 1 day away, meaning tomorrow. We're going to talk about that up next here on No Buts About It. Hello, everyone. I am Josh Butts here in Indiana, where we are finally getting snow, a ton of snow. I think we're supposed to get like 3 inches of snow, and my little heart is happy. Chus is in his basement in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, with a rubber glove for some reason.
Oh yeah, I had a rubber glove. You like the rubber glove? I had it. I initially so during the trophy ceremony, I had to have rubber gloves a couple months ago for the Lunch Sportsnet 3v3 basketball final here, and I had to carry out my league trophy. So that was a lot of fun. But I like to use the gloves, and I just happen to have the glove here, and I was messing around with it.
Yeah, for those who aren't on YouTube, he was like covering his face as we went into the intro. So
yeah, it was kind of fun. I just wanted to be goofy, silly, extraordinary. But yeah, here in Pittsburgh we have a lot of snow as well. It's kind of crazy. We're expecting more snow in the coming days. It's really cold here. Kind of brutal cold. I mean, I know
you get cold easily. I'm fat. I don't get cold as easily.
Okay, well, listen. I worked the Steelers game on Saturday against the Bengals, and I wore like 3 layers of socks. I wore thermal. I wore like 4 or 5 layers in the hoodies. I wore 2 long underwears and a pair of like nice strong jeans or khaki jean things. I was ready to go, and by the third quarter, I couldn't feel my feet. I
left work to go to the gym today in a tank top and basketball shorts, and I walked through the parking lot in those. Drove in my truck that has no heat, and then walked through another parking lot in those. So I was feeling pretty good. I was vibing. Nice little warm up. But
I wasn't working out at the gym, so I had to stand there.
You gotta get your moving.
Hey, you know what? I'm actually gaining weight. You know,
well, I'm trying to lose weight. But let's talk about football. Okay. So first, I know I got us off topic there, but
I mean, in fairness, I was kind of bringing up football. I mean, we were at the Lurs game on Saturday. Not me and you, but me being we.
That the Bengals won, but
yeah.
So before we get into the NFL playoffs, Carson Beck is no longer entering the NFL draft, making this an even more shallow draft class than it already was. He announced yesterday that he was entering the transfer portal and not going into the NFL draft, and he has already committed to the University of Miami. Chus, what do you think about this? Your new ACC rival? Yeah.
It was probably the least unexpected transfer out of all of the transfer portal candidates, just because we figured that since his girlfriend was down in Miami that he would probably follow suit. I think in my opinion, I mean, his stock probably would have fell, but he probably had the best chance to get drafted a little higher this year because, as you mentioned, the quarterback class was very shallow, very, very low. But obviously, I think that he thinks that he could probably go and play in Miami and probably enhance those skills to eventually get drafted in the first or second round and be like that first round candidate that he was hoping for. I think in a way he could have probably fallen kind of like Will Levis did, where it was like, oh, this guy's like a first round talent, but like other teams don't see him as that and they draft him like late, either late first round or like early second round or something like that. So as for ACC rival, I'm not really that nervous about it, to be honest, coming from like a standpoint. I know I'm a Pitt fan and Pitt doesn't look too hot right now when it comes to football. I mean, we lost our last 6 games of the season. A lot of that had to do with injuries and who was our backup at the time. Nothing against Nate Yarnell, but I think that Julian Duggar proved that he is probably a worthy backup. And in the event that Eli Holstein ends up getting, or not traded, but if he enters the transfer portal in a year or two, or ends up declaring the draft because he ends up being pretty good or something like that, Julian Duggar could pick up the load. But when it comes to Pitt and Miami and stuff like that, Miami has always had our number, but I also don't think Miami is going to be as big of a threat as we think they are. I still think that like teams like SMU and other teams that kind of shocked this year are going to still be consistently good. Louisville's still in that conversation, no matter even if they don't compete or not. Clemson's always at the top of the conference. Duke's still lingering on here and there, I feel like, and some of these other teams I think are also going to linger on. So I think despite them not being an SEC or a Big Ten team, I think that there's always like those powerhouses in the ACC that you kind of have to watch out for. And I feel like Miami always just kind of is there, but never ends up actually panning out, if you know what I mean. So, and I don't think Carson Beck is going to be the answer to fix that formula that's going on in Miami. Like I said, I'm not knocking on them because, like I said, I'm a Pitt fan, and you know, you can be like, oh, well, Pitt stinks. I agree. I mean, I think Pitt football is not good. I think that they looked great and looked like they could have probably made the college football playoff, but I mean, Miami also didn't make it either. So, I mean, the only teams in the ACC that made it were Clemson, SMU. So, I mean, I don't think any other ones made it that I can think of off the top of my head. But nonetheless, not surprised by the move. Do I think it's going to change anything for Miami? Not really. I think they're still going to be in the same spot. I don't think Carson Beck is like this generational Georgia quarterback. He might add a little bit new skills to the set just because the ACC, depending on the teams you're playing in, like a team like Miami compared to like the SEC, you might be playing a little lower competition than the SEC because obviously you know those teams are the big powerhouses. So you're playing like Miami might go up against like a Boston College, which is probably like an equivalent to Vanderbilt. And I sure as heck still wouldn't want to play Vanderbilt. And you know, Vanderbilt's probably like one of the lower end SEC teams. So at the end of the day, I don't think it changes too much. I'm not surprised, but are we expecting a bigger quarterback class next year? Do you know? I mean, because this might be like a 2022 situation, like where we had, you know, Malik Willis, Kenny Pickett, like a weaker quarterback draft class, quote unquote, sacrificed for our beautiful, unbelievable, beautiful quarterback draft class that we had last year.
Well, I mean, you've already got guys, and I always mispronounce his name, Drew Aller.
Yeah,
from Penn State. He's probably not coming in this year, and he would be eligible next year. Carson Beck, obviously. Quinn Ewers could also potentially wait another year. I think Arch Manning could theoretically come in
but
next
I don't
year,
think he's
but
really...
I don't know that he would, unless he just has a heck of a season. So, I mean, yeah, you have a lot of guys, but I mean, really, this class, all you have is Shador Sanders, another guy whose name I always mispronounce, Cam Ward, and Jalen Milroe.
Yeah.
So, I mean, unless I'm missing anyone, I don't think I am.
Well, none that are probably like first round ballot. I mean, there's definitely some guys out there that are probably like.
I saw Kyle McCord declared, but I mean, I'm not. Curtis Rourke, I think, declared too. But no one that's going to be a starter. No one that's going to light the league on fire necessarily. And that's going to be a problem for a lot of these teams, I think. And something else that we're kind of going to, or can get into right now, actually, Deshaun Watson, he just re-ruptured his Achilles. And so he's likely going to miss the entire 2025 season, already on that bad contract, already hasn't been living up to expectations. And then you look at the Browns, and they have the second overall pick in this draft class. But do you decide to go with presumably either Jameis Winston or Dorian Thompson-Robinson and just run with them and get someone else and wait a year and hope when Deshaun Watson comes back, he's somewhat usable? I don't know if that's the route, but then again, this draft class is so bad that I don't know if your quarterback of the future is in there either. So if I'm the Cleveland Browns, you might already be done for the season unless you make some insane free agency move.
Yeah, I think if anything, I think the route for Cleveland, if they're trying to find their next quarterback, would probably be free agency. I don't think that the draft class would probably be productive in a way for the Cleveland Browns. I mean, obviously they have guys that could be okay, but obviously I don't think they're any sort of starter. So, and we've already kind of alluded to the idea that these first round quarterback talent this draft is probably not going to pan out to be anything like a Jaden Daniels or arguably even a Caleb Williams, because we still, questionable that's he could still pan out, but we've had a lot of really good promising quarterbacks out of this past draft class, and if there was a quarterback to get, it would have been last year, not this year. So I think there's a possibility that Cleveland might have to go and try to look in the offseason or maybe make a trade for a team. I mean, obviously I know JJ McCarthy has been kind of in the news, and now it's starting to look like he's not going to be traded. So Cleveland might not be able to trade for someone like him, but there might be somebody out there that might be a backup or something where Cleveland might have to make that move where they trade, or they not necessarily for their first round pick, but I think that first round pick could be used for something a little bit more valuable in years to come, like a defensive player, or, maybe somebody to assist with Myles Garrett on the other side, or you get maybe a wide receiver, a top wide receiver. I mean, you have a second overall pick. There's only going to be one person that's picking above you. So, and that's New England. And New England's, I'm assuming they wouldn't get a quarterback because I think Drake Mason. Oh, Tennessee's ahead of them. I thought New England clinched it.
No, they beat the Bills.
Oh, right. So New England fell to what, 3 then, or 4?
Let's look it up here. I know that it's Tennessee.
Right. They said, because they said if Cincinnati had beaten New England at the beginning of the season, New England would have gotten the first overall pick, and Cincinnati would have made playoffs.
It's Tennessee, Cleveland, Giants, New England, and then Jacksonville.
Okay, so I stand corrected. I apologize for that. But Tennessee, even then, you're going to have Tennessee pick one player ahead of you. And Tennessee, in my opinion, is kind of a mess. They kind of need everything. Whereas Cleveland, I feel like you have pieces that you could utilize, but you're just not utilizing them. And I think that articulating them correctly, I think, could benefit your team. So you kind of have to see where Tennessee or what Tennessee goes with, because obviously they kind of planted Will Levis to be the future, and now it's kind of been like a weird quarterback thing going on down there, and they don't really have the wide receiver weapons. They don't really have the running back help. They don't have Derrick Henry down there. They have Pollard, who isn't bad, but he ain't no Derrick Henry. And, so there's a lot down there that Tennessee could do, but you only have one pick ahead of you. And I don't think that Cleveland should go the route. I mean, pretty sure the one year they took Myles Garrett first overall. The one year, I think Myles Garrett was the first overall pick. So, I mean, I Cleveland's also been the type of team to not obviously go quarterback first overall or second overall, I guess. But I wouldn't go quarterback. I personally wouldn't. I'd wait for free agency.
Yeah, I don't know what they're going to do, to be honest. And there's so many other hypotheticals that need to happen, like the combine and such. But I don't like the idea. Well, as a Bengals fan, I like the idea of them taking Cam Ward. But if I'm a Browns fan, I don't necessarily like the idea, because I don't know that Cam Ward I think he's super athletic, but I don't know if he's NFL ready. And I think the combine and a lot of these other things will also show us as he goes through the draft process if he's ready. But as of now, I'm not confident in that. And with the Cleveland Browns history of developing first round quarterbacks, I don't know if that's something I go with right away, especially when you could just take Travis Hunter.
Yeah, it's probably going to be arguably. Yeah, I would take Travis Hunter.
I mean, it'll depend on what Tennessee does, and Tennessee doesn't even have a GM right now. So it's
Tennessee is in shambles right now.
Well, Tennessee's Titans owner annoys me. She is very impatient, in my opinion. She fired Mike Vrabel like 1 year after he worked with Rand Carthon, and then she fired Rand Carthon after 1 year of working with Brian Callahan, and now she's looking for a new GM with Brian Callahan probably going to get fired next year if she follows this same kind of seesaw, and like she doesn't give him time to build a team together.
And that is a problem. I feel like a lot of times, I think there was a thing that Stay in the Jet fan threw into our group chat that you can probably talk about as well as I can, where it kind of mentioned all these coaches and different coordinators and stuff getting fired after like 1 season, 2 seasons. And I understand that the records don't always look good and you think that, okay, firing is going to be the best option. But some of these teams, some of these coaches that are getting fired after 1 season, I think in some aspects weren't always given a chance because you're throwing people like Jared Mayo into the fire with New England, and you're kind of just hoping that the scheme's going to work for the first year. You kind of have to hope, or you're going to have to assume in New England that it's not going to work. I mean, you're going to have to assume like, hey, you know what? Like this is going to be a tough scheme. It's not a heavy team. You got a young quarterback. You don't have a lot of weapons to work with on offense. The defense is kind of just there. Just you kind of have to brace for impact. And he goes through the season. He's kind of molding what he wants to be for the future, and they let him go. And I think that's kind of problematic, considering it's not like a situation where, for example, and I'm just going to throw this out here, Zach Taylor. Okay, let's say Zach Taylor gets fired. He's not going to, but let's say he gets fired. And the Bengals just finished 9-8. They went 9-8 last year, and they've had success over the last couple of years. And then they bring in whoever you want to name. They bring in Arthur Smith as their head coach. And Arthur Smith decides to go and get 3 wins. I think that's probably warranting, under the circumstances, assuming Joe Burrow doesn't get hurt and all these other circumstances, that yes, this coach needs to be fired because he is not, that good. The team, you can't, in my opinion, I don't think you can expect a lot out of these coaches that are just trying to build their team. But in situations where it's like, okay, we're letting go of Zach Taylor because we want more success in Cincinnati and we want to go in different directions, and then you bring in somebody and then they just torch the team for a season, that's a little different of a story. Mm-hmm. I think a lot of these coaches that are getting fired and some of these GMs, as you mentioned, I think some of these teams are a little too impatient. And sometimes in the NFL, it's a little bit of a waiting game because it took Houston a couple years to tank, and now Houston's back in the story. I mean, we've looked at the last, I know we haven't, but I've looked the last like 10 years of that division, and Houston, despite it seeming like forever of them having a losing season, it really wasn't that long ago where they had like that huge of a gap where the Houston Texans hadn't won the division. Now, I know that division hasn't been that dominant of a division. There's always a couple weak links in that division, but I mean, nonetheless, it's not like Houston still hasn't been out of the conversation that much since 2015, 2016. So I think sometimes these owners, as you mentioned, just kind of need some patience.
Yeah. So, let's get to the playoffs now that we've kind of punted that down the road. Let's first start with your team. Obviously, the Pittsburgh Steelers coming in as the 6th seed, which means you guys are heading up to Baltimore,
right,
to take on Lamar Jackson, Derrick Henry, and the Baltimore Ravens. What's kind of the vibe in Pittsburgh right now heading into this game?
I think there's a lot of question because I think the last couple of games have really kind of shown in some aspects uncertainty, because this team that looked like they were going to win the North and this team that looked very different coming off of the bye, beating Washington, a really good competitor over in the NFC. And then all of a sudden, having some weird games with some of the division rivals, but it happens, and then all of a sudden come December, after Cleveland, you tank, and not like tank as in like, oh, you're tanking for, whatever. But like you play a lot of tough games. You play 4 of your toughest games with Cincinnati fighting for a playoff spot. So obviously they're going to play hard, and they're a division rival, and it's freezing cold. A lot of conditions with that. But in that 4-game stretch, I get that 2 of them were away, but you have 4 games, and none of them you proved that you were able to keep up. Cincinnati might have been the only sort of notion where it's like, oh yeah, this team can keep up. But even then, you look at teams like you got blown out by Philadelphia, you got blown out by Baltimore, and you got blown out by Kansas City. Now, I think that Baltimore game could have been different had Russell Wilson not made 2 really, really dumb mistakes. I feel like that game could have been a lot more different of a story. But Kansas City and Philadelphia, 2 of the top teams in the NFC and AFC, respectfully, literally walked all over us, and it didn't even look close. And I think the thing is with the loss against Cincinnati on Saturday, I think a lot of fans are just expecting what we're expecting to lose. We are expecting to lose. I think there is hope. There's some hope that, hey, you know what? This could be the year that we do win that playoff game, because we're playing a division rival. We've beaten Baltimore in Baltimore before, but those circumstances were also when Lamar Jackson wasn't playing with fans and all that stuff. So it's a division rival. If there's a team that we can beat, it's going to be Baltimore or Houston. I think there's that kind of like hope there, but I think there's a lot of my friends, more or less, that were like Penn State fans, because we were talking about college football. Obviously, Penn State, I mean, unless you're not a college football fan, Penn State lost to Notre Dame yesterday in the semis, and now Notre Dame will go on.
Yeah, they did.
And so Notre Dame will now go on to play either Texas or Ohio State. And because of that, a lot of people that I know have been saying, well, if Penn State doesn't pull this out and they disappoint me, I can only imagine how I'm going to feel during the Steelers game. So a lot of people are in Pittsburgh are not sure. And I'm one of them, to be honest. I mean, this team has looked very cold going into the end of the season. It kind of reminds me of the 2020 season, where we really got cold at the end. We lost to Washington. We started like the season like 12-0 and then finished 1-3 or whatever it was. You start off really hot, you end really cold. You don't want that going into playoffs. I mean, at that point, you might as well throw in somebody like Cincinnati, who is hot. Yeah, and like that's the whole thing in a nutshell. And I think a lot of times it just reminds me of like, oh, the standard is the standard, a winning season and a bounce out of the first round. And then we haven't had that home game. If we would have won, if we would have beaten Baltimore in Baltimore, if Russ wouldn't have made those mistakes, we probably would have been in a different story. And in this case scenario, it probably would have been vice versa, theoretically speaking. Probably would have been Baltimore coming to Pittsburgh, or, I don't know how that would have worked. Baltimore might have been the 5th seed at that point. So it would have been the Chargers coming to Pittsburgh, which even at that point, I would take that over, what we're doing now. So I think to answer your question, I think there's just a lot of uncertainty. There's hope, but it's not like we're going into this game very confident.
I think the NFL playoffs, what separates them from so many other sports like basketball and baseball is it's a one and done. There's no series, obviously. And that adds to the drama in a way. Yeah. But it also makes it so much more important that you go in morally high, because you can have the most professional sports, but the NFL especially, the parity is so strong. And I mean, we saw that like the Indianapolis Colts versus the New York Giants. New York Giants needed to lose the game to get the first overall pick. Colts needed to win to continue their playoff hopes. And the New York Giants just come in and smoke them. The New York Giants weren't supposed to win that game with Drew Lock, but they did. And these teams are a lot closer than what they might appear necessarily. And that gets elevated even further in the playoffs, because these are all good teams.
Yeah.
And then to go into the playoffs in December, early January with these losses, it doesn't matter really who's on your roster, because there's this sort of demoralization in a way. And TJ Watt kind of alluded to that in his pregame interview for the Bengals game. He was like, we need to get back into this so that we can go in ready. We need to get in hot. And he hasn't even, like, TJ Watt's obviously always going to be TJ Watt, but he's even kind of had issues being as productive as what we're used to seeing from TJ Watt.
Yeah. I mean, it's definitely, I think it's a whole team issue. I think there's a lot of issues going on. I think that, in my opinion, there's a lot of things that this season was supposed to show, and it did show a lot. I mean, we finished the regular season last year with a 10-7 record, making playoffs with Mason Rudolph, Kenny Pickett, and Mitch Trubisky. We don't have any of those quarterbacks, and we get Russell Wilson and Justin Fields and a new offensive coordinator, and we still finish 10-7. And I just want to know, what are we like there? You can't, I mean, we're probably most likely not going to have Arthur Smith next year. I'm assuming he's kind of said like, oh, I love, this is my dream job, working with the Steelers and stuff like that. But if he has the opportunity to be a head coach somewhere, I mean, you're going to take head coach money. I mean, you're going to go somewhere else. And there's a lot of candidates, and I'm sure that you and Stan have talked about it on the live stream about the possibility of Arthur Smith going to the Jets, or being interviewed by some of these teams and being possibly a top head coach candidate. Obviously, he's had head coach experience in Atlanta, and he's had really good offensive coordinating experience in Tennessee as well as Pittsburgh. So, and I put that in quotations because it's not really, in my opinion, that much different than what we've already seen. But it's tough because I think there's a lot of issues that need to be addressed. And I don't know where to start, because I mean, like I said, there's this part of me that's like, oh, I think they can win. But there's also that part of me that's like, I don't think they can win. And like, that's not good. I actually had more belief that we could win last year with Mason Rudolph against Buffalo than I do this year. And I think that was just because we ended the season hot. We looked different. The team looked like it was rallying. Matt Canada was gone. The team was throwing touchdowns. This is crazy offense. And we did lose to Buffalo, yes. But towards the end, I was like, you know what? We at least made it. For what it's worth, Buffalo's a good team. This year, we should have been in a different position, but our flaws started showing against some of these good teams, and now I don't think we can beat any of the good teams. And even the mediocre, somewhat subpar teams that we also played against, we lost or played really close with. The Giants, yes, we've talked about it. The Giants are kind of a sneaky good team, and they're going to eventually be good down the line. But we had a really close home game with them. We probably shouldn't have. And then we lost to the Cowboys, which that was a defensive blown game. And then we lose to the Colts, which Justin Fields had an amazing showing, but our defense folded. And like I said, I'm not saying the Colts are bad, I mean, the Cowboys obviously didn't make playoffs, and neither did the Colts, but these are teams that we probably should have beaten if we want to prove that, hey, we're a contender. Come back and beat the Colts. Stop the Cowboys from pushing their comeback and doing a 15-16 play drive to win the game. There's these things that kind of show like, yeah, you know what? This team isn't actually as good as they look to be. So I think there's a lot of issues. Will they be addressed in the offseason? No, they won't be. They won't be. I don't think so. I think the first notion of business is, I don't think Terrell Austin's that good, like defensive coordinator.
Okay.
I think he probably should be let go. In my opinion. I mean, the defense looked good last year, but this year it doesn't look that good at all. I mean, I get the offense isn't doing much, but neither is the defense. The defense is like blowing. Like you look back at some of these games last year and you're like, man, or even in years past with the defense, and you're like, wow, this offense, despite it being a Matt Canada offense and us only having 180 yards, we won this game 14-10 because of our defense. And now we're getting blown out with a better offensive coordinator. So there's a lot of these weird things happening, and I'm hoping Omar Khan can fix it. But, I mean, apparently, and I don't know if this is entirely true. I mean, Mike Tomlin is a defensive-minded coach, And the issue with that is apparently he likes to take over the defensive play calls. And if that is the case scenario, then we might be a little it might be an argument to be made there. I mean, I'm not saying to fire him, but I'm just saying that maybe he should, not do that. He should just kind of, I don't know what he would do at that point. He's just the cheerleader at that point. But I think because something's not working. Yeah, well, you finished. You're looking. You look at the longevity of the last couple of years, and they've been 9-8 and 10-7 seasons. Where is the growth? Where are we going? And tomorrow, if we win the playoff game, then it's one game at a time. But I mean, it's one of those things where like a lot of us are like, okay, we're going into Baltimore again. Let's not make the same mistakes. Russ is going to start. Russ hasn't looked that good. A lot of people are saying put Justin Fields back in. And they asked about it, and Arthur Smith said some random quote. I'm gonna have to pull this up. Arthur Smith, Justin Fields quote. He said, Arthur Smith on maybe using Justin Fields some. I use that analogy. Let's burn the boats because you got to win to stay in and survive in advance. And so we'll use everything at our disposal, assuming it's an appropriate thing to do. I don't know what that means. What does that mean? Is he gonna use him? I mean, he's not starting, but and there's also that question of, will you re-sign Russell Wilson for 3 years for the $40 million? Are you going to keep Justin Fields? You're not going to draft a quarterback. Are you going to pick up another random guy off the streets? Are you going to go get Daniel Jones? Are you going to go get Kirk Cousins? Who are you going to go get next? You going to figure out who works?
What I think is funny is burn the boats means to like fully commit to something, and he didn't really commit to anything. It seems like
that's what I mean. Like, he's like, we're going to burn the boats. So are you starting Fields? No, I mean, I haven't heard an announcement. I mean, I'm assuming not. This Fields just like magically walks in the first play, and you're like, oh, that's interesting. I mean, I mean, they're not going to start him. There's no way, unless Russell Wilson starts like crapping himself halfway through the game, and it's like 14-0 to start, and maybe Fields will go in. But I think the fan base is just really frustrated. I'm frustrated. Nothing's changing. Everything stays the same. I want progress. That's why in the last couple of years, a lot of people have yelled at me because I say I want progress and I want Mike Tomlin fired. And everyone's like, Mike Tomlin's the best winningest coach of all time. And I get that. And I get it. But like I've said before, if Andy Reid can get fired from the Eagles, I think that Mike Tomlin, if Mike Tomlin hadn't had a losing season, he would have been gone by now. Because it's just, though, statistically speaking, if he was to have a losing season during this stretch and it wasn't the Pittsburgh Steelers, he probably would have been gone.
What do you think about George Pickens? Because, and I was looking here and I can't find the exact breakdown, but it looked like our rookie, I believe he's a 5th round pick, Josh Newton, who I like Josh Newton. I think he has some potential. But he does play super soft in coverage, and the Bengals defense as a whole, including Josh Newton, held him to 1 catch for -1 yards. So is that, I mean, I'd be concerned. I know Steelers fans don't want to hear that, but I mean, if your guy is getting locked up by this Bengals defense, especially the DBs that are pretty much all backups right now, that should be concerning, I'd think.
Yeah, I think it is. I think a lot of people were torching us, and a lot of Steelers fans were talking about it. I think the idea that George Pickens, we kept saying that once the game comes up with the Chiefs, George Pickens is going to be the game changer for the offense. And then you go in and you do a whole lot of nothing against the Kansas City Chiefs. And then you go up against Cincinnati and he gets 1 reception for -1 yards. And I get it. I mean, some of the throws and some of them were just, like I said, I didn't watch a lot of the game, but they threw like clips of it up on social media and on X and different other platforms and stuff. And you see it and you're kind of just like, all right, well, this isn't good. Because the problem also with the Steelers that is kind of a big issue in comparison to a lot of these other real big dominant teams, and even teams, the previous Steeler teams in the mid to 2010s, you have multiple threats. And the problem is the Steelers don't have multiple threats. They have George Pickens. once he's double covered or once he's covered, he's locked up. Russell Wilson has to hope that Van Jefferson and Mike Williams are open. And 90% of the time, they don't always use Mike Williams. So it's pretty much just Van Jefferson and maybe Calvin Austin III. And I think those guys are decent, but I think they're probably better as wide receiver threes. You need somebody that's going to be a little bit a step of ahead to kind of offset George Pickens. And Antonio Brown, when he played with Juju was a really good wide receiver too that complemented Antonio Brown really well. That's why Juju had such a breakout season. And then Antonio Brown had his a little incident, and he left, and then Juju ended up being our wide receiver one, and he was fine, but he never panned out to be that same Antonio Brown type of talent. And you go down the line and you look at like some of the wide receivers we had when we were in that Green Bay playoff push and stuff like that back in the early 2010s. You have players like Emmanuel Sanders and Mike Wallace and a lot of these really good wide receivers, and they're multiple threats. And then eventually you have to let one go. You let go of Emmanuel Sanders, you keep Mike Wallace. And you have all of these, and then you go and look at the Super Bowl in Arizona. You have Hines Ward, who's your top wide receiver, and then the person that makes the big difference in the playoffs is that secondary threat that you had all season, Santonio Holmes. And it's one of those things where the Steelers don't have that secondary guy. And if you only have George Pickens and your running backs, despite Najee Harris having 6+ or however, not 6+, I'm thinking of somebody else, but multiple in his career, 1,000+ yard running seasons. Despite that, it's been kind of underwhelming in my opinion. He's not like that guy that's like Le'Veon Bell or you go down the list of running backs as well that can do breakouts. And Jalen Warren has his moments where he can, but he's a backup and he's splitting reps right now. And so, that's kind of a concern, is just we don't really have the only weapon we have is George Pickens. If he gets shut down, or if Russ can't get to him, or Russ isn't throwing to him, or Pickens isn't catching the ball, we don't really have anything else to rely on like we have when we've been quote unquote Super Bowl contenders, and not even quote unquote when we were Super Bowl contenders, and when we've had these crazy wide receivers. Because even when we went to that AFC Championship against the Patriots, I mean, we had Le'Veon Bell, we had Antonio Brown, we had I want to say, I think our secondary wide receiver too was like Martavis Bryant, I want to say. And Martavis Bryant wasn't even that bad. Like, I mean, there was games, I remember the Steelers played the Arizona Cardinals at home back in 2015. I remember this because I was at that game, and Michael Vick was our backup. Ben was hurt. Michael Vick got hurt in the first half. He got a concussion. So they threw in Landry Jones, and Antonio Brown was already not playing. And I don't think Le'Veon Bell was playing because I think they were both hurt. And Landry Jones ended up making it work with Martavis Bryant and won us the game. And like, that's what I mean. Like you're like when George Pickens isn't there, there's no one to take over. And when George Pickens is shut down, there's no one to take over. So, and that's what I think separates like teams like Minnesota, who have Justin Jefferson and Jordan Addison, the Philadelphia Eagles, who have Devonta Smith and AJ Brown, and even you want to move forward back, Saquon Barkley as well, Aaron Jones, Minnesota. And I'm just talking NFC. You go over to the AFC and you can continue this entire conversation. So it's a concern, to put it in lamest terms. Yes.
Yeah. And I mean, your stars just frankly aren't showing up when I look at the Steelers. TJ Watt. And I think it's important to put these things in context too. And like I said when we first started this conversation, TJ Watt is TJ Watt. He's going to affect the game no matter what. But against the Bengals, terrible offensive line. He's lining up against, let's put this in context, Cody Ford, who had an ankle injury and then ended up having a chest injury. So he left the game, and TJ Watt starts lining up against Amarius Mims, who's a rookie, first-round pick, albeit, but he has a broken hand. And so his stats still, he only had one quarterback hit, 5 hurries, and he had no sacks lining up against Amarius Mims with a broken hand. And granted, they used like Drew Sample to chip him too. But also Alex Kappa, the guard on the right side, he has been awful. He got like, the Bengals fans are calling it the triple crown of bad stats, because he's like first in QB hits allowed, first in sacks allowed, and first in one other stat that isn't great. So TJ Watt really wasn't going up against that great of a situation for the Bengals, and the Bengals still managed to kind of, push him back and contain him for the most part. Now we're going to take this kind of performance and look at the Baltimore Ravens, who have both Derrick Henry and Lamar Jackson. Lamar Jackson needs to be contained. They need to find a way to contain him with a QB spy, whether that be Alex Highsmith or whether that be TJ Watt. I don't know. I assume it would probably be one of those two, though. And then the other one is probably going to be focused on Derrick Henry, because if you don't hit Derrick Henry behind the line, then Derrick Henry's gone. You have to get to Derrick Henry before Derrick Henry gets back to the line of scrimmage.
Yep.
Otherwise, you're screwed.
Yep.
And if the Steelers can't do that, then they are going to be in trouble. Cam Hayward was really the only name I consistently heard on the Steelers defense who was making a difference.
I agree.
Which he was making a huge difference. He was batting balls all night. And
Cam Hayward, despite being as old as he is, he's still playing like he's in his prime, which I give that dude so much credit for everything that he does.
But you don't want your defensive tackle to have to do everything against the Baltimore Ravens.
And he shouldn't, because our defense is always ranked so freaking high every year. You have, and I'm not blaming it just on like safeties, but you have like players like top players like Minka. You talk highly about Alex Highsmith and TJ Watt. You talk highly about Herbig, and you have all of these and you pick up like Joey Porter Jr. and you have like these cornerbacks. You pick up Cam Sutton, who does nothing, and you have all of these defensive players, and they're supposed to be in this top ranked defense, and they do nothing. And I'm not saying TJ does nothing, but I'm just saying in a entirety perspective, they're not doing as much as they used to. And this defense is supposed to just be getting better and better, and it almost seems like it's getting kind of worse, because TJ was a menace last year, and TJ's not as good as he was. Now, it just could be an off year. I mean, every player has an off year and stuff like that. But I agree. I don't think he's as big of a threat as he has been in years past. And I don't think that comes with age. I think that's just there's something going on, and I don't know what it is, but who knows. But I don't know. I think the only thing that's kind of a benefit for the Steelers going into Sunday or Saturday tomorrow is the fact that we don't have to worry about Zay Flowers. And right. Zay Flowers being their top target, now we just have to rely on shutting down the tight ends, which Steelers don't always do that well, and Derrick Henry, and hoping that we don't have –
And Lamar.
And Lamar, yeah, but we have to hope that Lamar doesn't – he scrambles, but he doesn't do it as much as he used to in his youth. And I think he throws more, so you kind of have to hope that, players like Bateman and stuff aren't going to pop off on you. But expect Mark Andrews.
I really don't like this for you guys. If I'm a Steelers fan, I'm extremely concerned, because I think your best bet to win this game is for the offense to put up more points than what the Baltimore offense can, which sounds really dumb, but the Ravens' weakest link all year has been their defense. So the Steelers' offense is going to have to kind of make that vulnerable and open that up. And I don't know that they can do that.
I don't think they can either. I mean, this team, this specific team, I don't think they can. The thing is also, as I've mentioned, the defense hasn't looked too strong for the Steelers. So it'll be tough to contain the offense, Baltimore's offense. And then from a Steelers perspective, on an offensive perspective, we haven't really done a whole lot of anything against any of the top defenses, period. And last time we played Baltimore's defense in Baltimore, we got screwed. Russell Wilson should have went down, and it ended up being a fumble, and then they ended up getting a pick six right after Minka had gotten an interception on a really dumb play that Russell Wilson probably shouldn't have made. And I think that's another thing that they need to make sure of is Russell Wilson can't be making dumb mistakes in a game like this. And like I said, I think some of the situations last year with Buffalo, I don't really remember that game. I kind of choose to block it out, but some of the mistakes that Mason made weren't super catastrophic. He threw a pick in the end zone, which did cost, which was a big part of the loss. But I think he played well to an extent. obviously, considering he was third string, third guy up. Russell Wilson is meant to be the starter, and he is making, from a perspective, maybe possibly even worse mistakes and costly mistakes. If we win that game in Baltimore, we win the division. We don't worry about this. We're at home. I work tomorrow. But instead, I'm not working tomorrow. I'm sitting on my couch watching Baltimore Ravens fans get to work. And we just have to kind of hope for the best. But I'm not confident. Then again, though, I probably wouldn't have been that confident going into Houston either, even if we were the 5th seed. I don't think so, because somehow, some way, despite Houston being all injured, players like Nico Collins and the rest of their wide receiver backups would have torched our DBs, and somehow we would have lost 24-20. And it's just the way of the game. And this is a big development, because if you put in perspective at this point, if we lose this year, next year will be we'll be going into the 2025 season, and we'll be coming up on our 10-year anniversary, of no playoff wins, of our last playoff win. And that still happens to be Cincinnati. And you think about how long ago 10 years ago was. You think about it, though. 10 years. It's been 10 years. And at that point, if we don't win tomorrow, and next year, I'll think back and I'm like, dang, last time the Steelers won a playoff game, I was in high school, and now I'm working. Like, it's just, I'm just saying, like, it's just because.
I think I was in middle school. I think I was still in 8th grade.
What?
Yeah, 2015?
Oh, right. Middle
I'm
school.
older than you.
Yeah, so I would have been in middle school too. So either way, yeah, I would have been in middle school. And now, decade later, I'm working. So,
But yeah, I do want to talk about a few other of the playoff games, but I do think we both agree that the Steelers have a very steep uphill battle here in Baltimore.
and they can do it because it's division, but it's not. There's not high hopes.
Okay, no panic at the disco, just panic in Baltimore for the Pittsburgh Steelers. A very niche group of people will get that. Before we move on to these other playoff games, though, there is some news. Florida Governor Ron DeSantis has declared January 10th, 2025 as Mike Evans Day throughout the entire state to honor the Buccaneers receiver for his tying the record for most consecutive 1,000-yard seasons.
Nice. That's
also
cool. Going in for Tampa Bay this weekend.
Yeah, big moves. I like Mike Evans a lot, so he's now getting a holiday. Also in Florida, the Dolphins fired special teams coordinator Danny Crossman and wide receivers coach / pass game specialist Wes Welker. So got some moves coming out of Miami. Maybe trying to appease Tyreek Hill a little bit. We'll see.
Probably. That's crazy to consider Tyreek Hill might not be on the Dolphins next year. I mean, he doesn't. It's crazy concept, because me and you talked about this a couple years ago, where we said that once his tenure in Miami was up, he was going to be done completely. But now it looks like he might be on the move somewhere else.
We talked about that because that's what he said.
Yeah, but now it looks like he's going somewhere else.
Let's look at some of these other NFL games here that we've got coming up. So, Broncos are playing the Buffalo Bills. And I personally would love to see the Broncos get their teeth kicked in now. I do like Bo Nix. I think he's got a good future ahead of him, but I do not want to see the Broncos go on to win anything this season. So I think the Bills would be a much better team to have in these championship games. So I'd love for the Bills to just kind of go out there. And I believe there's snow in Buffalo as well. So this should be a snow game.
There's always snow in Buffalo.
So just to go out there, score early on this number one or top defense, top 5, I think, if they're not number 1, and just light them up and just make a statement, because Josh Allen has been playing fantastic. And if Joe Burrow isn't going to win the MVP, which he probably isn't, I hope Josh Allen does, because he has carried this team on his back to be where they are today.
So in my opinion, I think that we need either a Denver or a Chargers win. I really like the Broncos and I really like the Chargers. And we'll talk about the Chargers here in a minute. The thing about the Broncos is I don't think they're going to win. I'm hopeful that they do. But the reason that I'm hopeful that they do is just so Kansas City can get a run for their money. Because I don't think when you look at Denver and you look at LA, I think they are the only two teams that can give Kansas City a run for their money in Arrowhead.
You don't think Buffalo can?
No, I don't. Buffalo, every time they go to Arrowhead in the playoffs, they lose. I don't care. This past game where they beat Kansas City and they're the one of two losses where the actual full team started, they were in Orchard Park. It was a whole.
Anytime anyone goes into Arrowhead, they lose. Arrowhead's like impossible to win in.
Yeah, but guess what? The Chargers and the Broncos both have had the closest chances to win. I think that the Chargers and the Broncos are the only two teams that are actually going to be able to beat Kansas City in this playoffs. So if you're going to root for a team, I mean, at that point, you might as well root for the Chargers.
You think?
I don't because the Steelers aren't going to go ahead.
You think Bo Nix has a better chance of walking into Arrowhead and going toe to toe with Aaron Rodgers or not Aaron Rodgers? Who the hell is this? Patrick Mahomes? Actually. You think he has a better chance of new trade alert? No, Patrick Mahomes than Josh Allen does of going into Arrowhead and going toe to toe with Patrick Mahomes?
The thing is, though, is you have to look back at the entire season too. Bo Nix and the Broncos. I mean, granted, we don't know what it was like when Kansas City went to Denver fully because it was all a bunch of bums and backups and stuff like that. I think Buffalo would have a really good chance, but the problem is Buffalo struggles. And it's nothing against Buffalo because I want Buffalo to succeed. And my dream Super Bowl this year is to have Buffalo in the Super Bowl. If it's not Pittsburgh, and I know it's not going to be Pittsburgh, have Buffalo in the freaking Super Bowl. Have them in the Super Bowl. I want them in the Super Bowl. But I think from my perspective and my point of view, I just don't know if they're going to be able to get it done in Arrowhead. And the thing is I think best case scenario, and honestly, coming to think of it, I think Buffalo will win against Denver. And I think this is dream. This is dream scenario here. Okay. This is a dream scenario. If you have the Steelers lose, because I'm just kind of expecting this to happen coming from a Steelers fan. If the Chargers beat Houston and Buffalo beats Denver, you'll have Buffalo go up against Baltimore. Baltimore will go to Buffalo. Then you have the Chargers playing Kansas City. If we can have the Chargers beat Kansas City, it'll be beautiful. Then you can have Buffalo play the Chargers, and then Buffalo can win, and then Buffalo will go to the Super Bowl and versus one of the great NFC teams, and they can have a bloodbath of a game, and it'll be awesome. But I think the key to success in the AFC is making sure one of those other AFC division rivals for the Chiefs win, because if Buffalo has to go to Arrowhead, it's going to be tough. I
mean, I don't know. First of all, I don't think this Chiefs team is that good.
I don't either, but they like to win. I know
they have their 15 wins, and that's all fine and dandy. But if you look at their wins, someone flipped all of the one-win games, basically. So games that came down to one win or one score, flipped them. And I think the Chiefs had the number one pick now. Yeah. So the Chiefs haven't really been blowing anyone out, or they're winning off of blocked field goals or. Jackson, they almost lost to the Rams, or not the Rams, the Raiders when Jackson.
You even look at it though, Buffalo and Kansas City have pretty much had a one possession game,
and they probably will when they play. But I think Buffalo is a much better team,
and I don't disagree. But I think there's always that difference of having the division rival in there, and like I said, I don't think it'll be Denver, but we need one of those division rivals to go in there because. I would be nervous if I was a Buffalo fan going back to Kansas City, regardless of how good or bad Kansas City is. Because I think when Kansas City goes to the Super Bowl this year, if they do, I think they're going to get smoked by one of the NFC teams because these NFC teams are crazy this year. Debatable or not, I think these NFC teams are crazy. Your fifth wildcard team is the freaking Minnesota Vikings, who were just trying to fight for first place last week. That is crazy. And that's your NFC? You think the only team probably out of the AFC that's any competition to them is probably Buffalo. but like I said, I stand firm in my Kansas City opinion. I think I wouldn't want to be Buffalo going back to Kansas City. Your dream scenario if you're Buffalo is you beat Denver and the Chargers beat Houston and the Chargers go to Kansas City, beat Kansas City, and then you beat Baltimore in Orchard Park, and you'll have a home AFC Championship game when the Chargers come to town. And you could probably beat the Chargers as long as they're not super hot at that point.
Do you think the Chargers can beat Houston? I think they can beat Houston.
I think they can beat Houston, yes. And then at that point, it comes down to division. I mean, you look at the Chargers and Chiefs over these two games they won. The Chiefs beat the Chargers in Arrowhead Stadium 19-17. 19-17. And then the Chiefs went into LA and beat them 17-10. The Chargers can beat the Chiefs. I know they can. And I believe in the Chargers. And I think that the Chargers can beat Houston. I think that I don't think the Chargers have all the weapons, but I think that they have enough weapons to get it done. And Houston, I think if this was a different year and a lot of their players didn't get hurt, I think Houston against the Chargers would be a whole different story. But this Houston team is not playing that good. And I think it really comes down to the injuries. And I think the Chargers can win that game. I'm assuming you agree with that as well.
Yeah, no, I think the Chargers can win that game. But my concern with them going against Kansas City is their offensive line. Their offensive line has been struggling lately. And, Chris Jones lines up wherever he wants.
You're not wrong. But but even at that point, you have all of the wild cards lose. Houston against Kansas City?
No.
Exactly. I don't think there's any real viable option at that point.
I don't want Buffalo
to go against Kansas City. Okay, well, Buffalo.
Buffalo is all we have. That's all we have to hold on to.
I know, but we have to hope. If we have to hope that Buffalo can get the easiest walk that they possibly can so that they don't have to play Kansas City. Because if we can have them get upset by like a Chargers or something like that because of the division and the craziness of all that, then we won't have to worry about it. But Buffalo, I agree, is all we have. I mean, for me, I would say the Steelers, but I don't trust the Steelers going up against Kansas City again in Arrowhead. We got blown out by them the first time. I don't want to go to Arrowhead. I don't even know if I would watch that game. So, and then at that point, I would be rooting for the Broncos because if the Broncos won, then we would just have to go to Buffalo. And even then, I don't know if we would want to go to Buffalo. Well, actually, we wouldn't go to Buffalo. Where would we go at that point? We would go. Well, if the Chargers, if we beat Baltimore and the Broncos beat that, so the Broncos. Would we go to LA then at that point? If all the divisions lost except Kansas City, I think we would go to LA and then Denver would play in Kansas City. I mean, hey, you know what? I hope that happens. That would be
6 and 5 and 7 and 1 seeds left. So
yeah, so we would go to LA. Oh, that's awesome.
Which I mean, we can go over to the NFC.
Speaking of LA, because
speaking of LA,
yeah.
Obviously, the LA fires are awful and a terrible tragedy. And I've got a friend over there who's been filming. He's a videographer, and he's not in any danger, thank God. But he's been filming stuff, and it's kind of crazy how close it is to the main city. And LA has now moved. The Rams have lost their home field advantage essentially because of the fires, and they've moved that game against the Minnesota Vikings to the Arizona Cardinals Stadium. So now we're in a situation where that's kind of a neutral zone game looking at the NFC playoffs. So that's something that we have to take into account. And then we also have the Eagles against the Packers, which should be a good game theoretically. Both those quarterbacks look like they're healthy and are going to play, meaning Jalen Hurts and Jordan Love. Christian Watson is, of course, out, though. And then for the Buccaneers against the Commanders, I believe the main notable injury update there is that Marshawn Lattimore looks like he'll play for the Commanders. So, Chus, what do you think of this lineup here for the NFC?
I love the NFC, and I've talked really highly of them this year. This NFC is beautiful. I mean, like I said, you got the Lions and the Vikings that obviously are very, very, very talented. Everyone's talking about the Lions, but the Lions and the Vikings themselves are really good. The Eagles are very sneaky good too. And just because they're going against Green Bay doesn't mean Green Bay isn't going to give them a run for their money. Like we can talk about the AFC and how some of these teams, like for example, like Pittsburgh is probably not going to give Baltimore a run for their money. And you can talk about all these teams like, oh yeah, they're going to get smacked. But in a way, I think any of these NFC teams could probably upset each other. Who'd you say Tampa was playing? Are they? They're not. Are they actually playing Washington? Oh, no, they're playing Minnesota. Wouldn't they be? Because this is Minnesota the 5th seed. Or is
yeah. Well, yeah. No. Buccaneers play Commanders. Rams play Vikings.
right? Tampa. You know what? Tampa. Yep, Tampa's the 3rd seed. I tend to forget about that. Yeah.
But
so
something I do want to bring up when you're talking about the strength of this NFC is the Packers are the 7th seed, and they're 11-6. They're a strong 7th seed.
It's a very strong 7th seed. And what are the records of LA Rams and the Bucks? Are they both 9-8? Or
they're both 10-7.
Yeah, see that's really good. Like that is really good. Like considering that like our wild cards are like 10-7, you know, on the AFC side. I mean, you look at the NFC and like their division leaders are 10-7. Yeah, that's a little weaker, but like you go and look at their wild cards, and I mean, they're all decent. It's all good.
In the NFC, you have 3 teams with 14 or more wins,
which is crazy. That's why I think the NFC is so fun. I think you have the Vikings, and you have the Buccaneers and the Buccaneers Commanders, because I got it all screwed up now because I keep thinking the Buccaneers are the 4th seed and they're not. They're the 3rd seed. So I don't think the Buccaneers are gonna win that matchup. I'm gonna pull up the playoff.
I would say,
just because I need a visual.
It depends what version of Baker shows up.
Yeah. So I mean, it's
I could see that one going either way, because there have been some games where Baker and Mike Evans have kind of just, but then there's been other games where like Mike Evans has lit it up. Heck, Jalen McMillan, a rookie out of Washington.
McMillan has been doing great.
He's been doing phenomenal filling in for Chris Godwin. Bucky Irving has very quietly been having a rookie. Like this Buccaneers offense they got some players that haven't really been necessarily talked about nationally, but they're a bit Cade Otton even. Like, so they got some dudes.
I mean, I was gonna say, imagine if this team had Chris Godwin still. Like, I mean, this team would be even that much better. I mean, the thing is they're going up against the Commanders, and the Commanders also have a pretty good team. I mean, they're 12-5, but also have had a very competitive season. Even with the Eagles having that weird game where they had that huge lead and Kenny Pickett kind of blew it, and there was like that whole weird thing that went on, injuries and whatnot. I mean, Washington ended up coming back and winning that game and stuff like that, but it just shows how good Jaden Daniels, despite being a rookie, is for that team. I mean, this is kind of like a Houston Texans story in a way, but even more because we have two rookies, 2 rookie quarterbacks in a similar story, only not division winners because Houston won the division last year. But I mean, it's really cool to see rookie quarterbacks thrive, especially going into playoffs and stuff like that. And I think Jaden Daniels, like you said, that's a game that could go either way. You're in Tampa. Washington is going to go to Tampa. Jaden Daniels is playing in his first playoff game, and it's going to be away. So it's not very beneficial for the team. But the team is still good. So is Tampa. A game could go either way. I think if there's going to be any sort of upset, I think that the upset that's going to happen where a team loses would be the Rams and the Vikings, if it's going to be a wild card team upsetting a division. I think Tampa probably has a shot at beating Washington, in my opinion. But I wouldn't be shocked if Washington won.
No, I wouldn't be shocked if Washington won either. Just because,
yeah,
Cliff Kingsbury and Jaden Daniels, they're the combination of those two is just great on offense. And then Dan Quinn, he's got that defense cooking. And now they're getting Marshawn Lattimore back, presumably 100% healthy. That's big for them because their corners are probably their weakest part of their defense. Yeah. So to get that guy back and probably have him on Mike Evans, that will help a lot. And something we should not forget is Mike Evans and Marshawn Lattimore do not get along. They have not gotten along since Marshawn Lattimore was on the Saints. Yes. And so there will likely be a lot of like pushing and shoving on those routes. And there may be some penalties that come into play here as well. So let's not forget about that.
No, for sure. But I mean, it's going to be a good game. And I think another good game will be the Rams and the Vikings, but I think also with that game, since it's not in LA, unfortunately, I think because of the neutral zone site, I think that the Vikings will probably pick up that win. I think the Vikings probably had a shot at picking up the win regardless, but I think it doesn't help having your fans.
So let's look at this game. I think that the Lions revealed something very important about the Minnesota Vikings last week. And that is, if you can force Sam Darnold to hold on to the ball, which he already holds on to the ball for a long time, but you can shut down that entire offense. And the Lions' pass rush is not that great. And they managed to get to Sam Darnold a lot.
Yeah.
And Aaron Glenn sold out, basically saying, I bet that our pass rush can get to Sam Darnold before Sam Darnold can throw the ball. And that worked. And I think the LA Rams are going to look at that and they're going to say, hey, we got some guys on our defensive line. We have Jared Verse. We have Braden Fisk. We have, they have a ton of defensive linemen that they have drafted and have developed, and they have done phenomenal. Jared Verse is probably a defensive rookie of the year candidate, to be honest. Mm-hmm. And so you look at that, and if I'm the Rams, I'm saying we're bringing the house until Sam Darnold shows us that he can get rid of the ball quickly enough.
And he might not be able to. And I mean, and that might help. I mean, and also, I mean, this is another situation where I'm talking about high-powered offenses. When we were talking about this earlier in the show, the LA Rams are another one of those teams that are secretly an unsung hero when it comes to that situation, because the Rams have Cooper Kupp and Puka Nacua and Kyron Williams. I mean, that is a very also high-powered offense. So
I mean, if all the Viking or the Rams have to do to stop the Vikings, and this is easier said than done for sure, but if you can steal a few possessions away from the Vikings just by getting those coverage sacks or even just normal sacks where you just beat the line, then that could be the game right there. And the LA Rams have the formula to beat the Minnesota Vikings. So, and it's been provided by the Detroit Lions. So now they just have to execute.
Yeah. So that'll be an interesting game. I think that game will be interesting. I think that the Commanders Buccaneers game will be interesting. Packers Eagles. How are we feeling about that game? Because I think it should be a good game. I think the Eagles are going to run away with it. I think that game will probably be your runaway game compared to the other two. But I think the Packers will have a good showing. I think that the problem with the Packers is I just think that their team is good, but I don't think they're like on a similar level as like the Eagles and some of these other teams we've already talked about and touched base with. I think their missing piece is a wide receiver. I think their wide receivers are decent, but Jaden Reed this season kind of just was a big part of their offense and then kind of fell off. And then Christian Watson was there and Romeo Doubs, and they all kind of fell off. They're all kind of like there, but then they're not. And then you have to rely on players like Josh Jacobs, and I don't think that that's enough, for a team like Green Bay. So I think the team has potential and future down the road, but I think one of their big things they need to work on is a wide receiver. And I think, unfortunately, Philadelphia has the defense and the offense to do it.
So this game is going to be, I think, a prove it game for Nick Sirianni. And not that he's going to get fired necessarily if they lose it. But remember last year, Eagles got smacked in the playoffs.
They did.
And it was a shocker. And people were calling for Nick Sirianni's job. And I think this year they're going into a similar situation with a game that they should win against a very good team. The Packers are still a very good team.
Yeah.
But if you look at this game, the Eagles should win this game. That being said, Matt LaFleur is very good at adapting to the personnel that he has available to him. For example, when Jordan Love went down multiple times this season, they immediately adapted to Malik Willis by not necessarily making him throw as much and doing a lot of jet sweeps, which allowed him to get the ball into the hands of his receivers still, especially his speedy guys, and get yards, but it didn't put the onus of the offense onto Malik Willis. And Malik Willis still made throws, of course, but the burden was lifted a little bit. And I could see something similar happening against the Eagles. If they see that there is one thing that is kind of, vulnerable, they will adapt the game quickly to fix that and make sure that they are able to kind of attack that as quickly as possible and as many times as possible. And Christian Watson being out, that will make a big difference. But say and I don't know if this will happen, but let's just say hypothetically, linebackers aren't able to cover the tight ends for whatever reason. Like Tucker Kraft is just open all the time. Every route. It's like, okay, well, we're gonna figure out how to make him even more open. How do we force that linebacker to drop back even further out of the flat, and we can just dink and dunk our way to the end zone and keep the ball out of Jalen Hurts' hands, keep the ball out of Saquon Barkley's hands. Because that's ultimately what this game may come down to, is the time of possession and how can the Packers prevent the Eagles from being on the field on offense.
Exactly. I agree. I mean, like I said, though, I think for me, it's very much Philadelphia's game to win here. And then from there, assuming the way that I think that it's going to go, I mean, then you have a matchup against the Vikings, which that's just how I think it's going to go. I think it's going to go Bucks, Eagles, Vikings, and I think it's going to be Eagles, Vikings, and then, or no, it won't be, because Vikings are the lowest seed. So Vikings will actually go to Detroit again. Eagles will play the Buccaneers, which I think the Eagles can beat the Buccaneers at that point. Tampa in Philly, which will be fun though, because that'll be a fun game at that point. But we'll see. I mean, I like the NFC. I'm personally okay with any team out of the NFC coming out, in my opinion. If Green Bay won it, cool. If Philly wins it in the NFC, cool. Detroit, Minnesota, LA, give me Tampa. I don't care. Any one of those NFC teams, I'm rooting for you, unless you're playing the Steelers. But you most likely won't be.
They won't
but
be.
there's always that thing. People were saying they're throwing back in the Steelers, and then we can wrap up here. But unless you had any final thoughts, but somebody posted a dumb thing on Facebook, which I don't know who it was, and it wasn't true, but somebody was like, the last time the Steelers were a 6th seed, the Steelers won the Super Bowl. The Steelers did win the Super Bowl as a 6th seed in 2005, yes, but the last time we were a 6th seed, we actually got spanked the next round, and that happened to be 10 years ago, when it was the last time we won a playoff game. So maybe it's a 6th seed, little alluding to the idea. And I think we've even had a couple runs with 6 seeds since then. But I think that was actually the last time, because we won the division, and then we had some seasons where we didn't make it, and then we had a home game, and yeah. So I think that was the last time we were a 6th seed. And so to whoever said that to try to rile up the Steelers fans, it didn't work, because it's not true. And that's pretty much saying we're going to get smoked in the divisional round, which I guess is okay considering we haven't won a playoff game. But I still don't know how to feel about that. But we'll see. We need big Chargers win. If we don't want Buffalo, then it's going to have to be if we want Buffalo, we're going to have to hope for the Chargers then. No Denver.
No Denver. Okay. Well, we will see what happens. We've obviously gone over a little bit, but I'm going to go ahead and go into my spiel.
Perfect.
Thank you for listening to today's show. If you enjoyed, please remember to like, comment, and subscribe. Let us know who you think is going to win these playoff games. But also, we can be found anywhere you listen to podcasts and on YouTube at No Butts Show. Our social media pages are NoButts_show on Instagram. My Twitter is Josh_Butts_2001. And if you would like to reach us, you can email us at bullmoosepodcast2. That's the number 2 at gmail.com. Finally, our spread shop will be in the description, so check out the merch. Once again, if you enjoyed today's show, like, comment, and subscribe. Until next time, go do something nice for someone.